Oh man, I love Final Fantasy, but sometimes I just get the sense that it doesn't love me back. Drop some knowledge on you a little bit about how monsters act in Final Fantasy. Basically, a monster can decide to take one of 4 actions, and there's a kind of a priority to this. The first thing they'll try to do is run away from battle. Every monster has a hidden stat that basically determines how scared they are of your buff-ass light warriors, and if it's below a certain threshold, that monster will flee from combat. This is exceedingly rare and not something that really affects normal gameplay much, so for all intents and purposes of the 4 fiends, we can just ignore that. Even though it is technically possible to make them run away by use of the White Magic Fear spell. I think Carrie in particular does not have a resistance to fear, so it's a little easier to make her run away, but still very difficult. Not something that you would use as a actual in-game strategy. But after that, the monster will decide whether or not to use a spell. A monster can have up to 8 spells in their spell list, and they'll always use the same spells in the same order. Do I have... Who's got the Light Axe? Will, you got it? Yeah, Light Axe, that's what I want. And burn him with Thor. So for example, Astus, he has like 8 spells in his list, but Rub always comes first. You've always got to get through Rub before anything else. And this is the problem that I'm currently having with Lich in the Temple of the Fiends, because Lich's spell threshold, which determines the odds of a monster deciding to use a spell, is like 75%. He's going to use a spell 75% of the time, and since Nuke is right at the front of his spell list, he's going to always open with Nuke. So 3/4 of my runs into that dungeon are just trash right from that point. After that, a monster will decide whether or not to use a skill, and then this works exactly like spells. They'll have a list of skills. I think monsters can have 4, and they always use them in the same order. And skills, for all intents and purposes, are identical to spells in the game. It's just the 2 lists are independent. So Lich doesn't have any skills, but if he did, he could decide to use either Nuke or whatever is in the first slot of his skill list. Like if he had a skill that just says stand there and look ugly. And then if a monster decides to not run and to not use a spell and to not use a skill, then they will attack. So what I need to do in this Lich fight is get Lich to attack me in its opening round, because the opening round is enough for me to pile 500 points of damage on it and kill it. But like I said, this means that because Lich is not going to run, and he doesn't have any skills, it's just a straight 75% of the time he's going to use Nuke, and 25% of the time he's going to attack. So, the odds are really stacked against me here. As a result, I've got to buff Rio's hit points up a little bit. So I came back to the Temple of Ordeal, Castle of Temple, it's a castle. And actually, you know what? I didn't get all these treasures when I was in here. I thought I did, but I didn't. That's so weird to me. Let me see here. Because there's an ice sword. There's an ice sword. Why didn't I open that? I must have gotten into a fight right in front of that treasure box, and then just had not gone back to open it. Whatever, there's a spiked square right here with zombie dragons. And this is a pretty good way to just gain levels pretty quickly. Just because you don't have to actually wander around the map. The fight's always here, and you can fight it as much as you want. It's usually a 1 or 2 round fight, depending on whether I get good rolls. And it's worth over 1,000 experience. So we're going to spend 15 minutes just standing here, doing this. This is our life now. And hopefully that will... I want 2 things out of this. I want Cole, his level ups dramatically increase the amount of damage he can do by raising his attack and hit percentage as he levels up, as opposed to Will and Jim, who get their boosts from the equipment they use. And I want to see Rio's hit points go up. Because Rio... each White Warrior also has a hidden stat of magic defense that kind of goes up just as they level up. So leveling up will not only increase Rio's hit points, it'll also increase his resistance to the Nuke spell. But I need to get it to where, even if Rio just barely survives the spell some of the time, that would be good enough. So I think 15 minutes killing ZombieDs is going to dramatically improve my chances of getting past that spell. If it were just Lich, if Lich was the only thing in the dungeon to worry about, I would just keep throwing myself at him, but he's not. There's so much else in the dungeon between the Frosties and the Ghasties and the Bluezoids and the Hey and all the waters. Oh god, the water. I don't even want to think about it. What kind of asshole dies to water? It's ridiculous. I mean, it's not that ridiculous. I mean, hundreds of people drown every year, I'm sure, and it's always very tragic when that happens. I'm just saying, I didn't want it to happen in my Final Fantasy. That was retarded. And it was totally my fault. Like, I should not have pushed that battle the way I pushed it. I was just being stupid. So there is a little bit of training in this video here, because I'm trying to do something very specific in getting the Mazmune and getting out of that dungeon. The other thing that this will increase, it'll help me get out of the dungeon once I have the Mazmune, because Ryo only has, right now, 4 charges of the warp spell, and one of those charges he needs to use on the top floor of the dungeon to get out. But since the Mazmune is very, very deep in the dungeon, on like the 9th floor, that means I would have to walk back a lot of floors. Like, in particular, I would have to... Let's see. I would have to walk off of the air floor if I didn't want to refight any of the 4 fiends. Because if I used warp on the air floor, that would take me back to the water floor, or I would have to decide to either use warp again or fight Kraken. So if I warp past Kraken, I've got to decide whether to use warp again or fight Carrie. And then if I use my 3rd warp there, then I have to fight Lich. I can't just walk past Lich. And fighting Lich twice is... That reduces the chances of getting out of the dungeon. I'd have to bypass Nuke twice, so it reduces it to 1 in 8 shot of just getting past Nuke. Not even worrying about all the other dangers in the dungeon. That's really not going to happen. So, I would have to probably refight Carrie, since Carrie's the least dangerous of them. Or I would have to walk off the air floor, which is not a good idea because the air floor is one of the most dangerous floors. And so a couple of extra warp charges will be good because I can use warp to bypass a lot more of the dungeon on my return trip. Like the Gas D floor, I want to just get off of that. I don't even want to deal with that crap. This is not the only spot in the game where you can level up relatively quickly off of spiked squares. The Eye in the Ice Cave is really good for this, because the Eye goes down in 1 round, pretty much guaranteed to 1 attack at warriors of my caliber. I've got Pro Ring, so his instant death spell is very, very unlikely to hit me. The reason I don't want to go there is because you've got to go through the entire Ice Cave to reach the Eye, and just, no, I don't want to deal with it. This is much better because it's much closer, it's a lot quicker to walk through this dungeon to get to the spiked square. The other spot that I've read about, but I have never personally used, is there is a suit of flame armor in the volcano, which I think might actually be better than the silver armor one of my knights is wearing, but whatever, I don't need to worry about it. And it's actually guarded by 2 spiked squares. One is a fight against 2 Agamas, they're like these fire lizard guys, and then one is against a red dragon. And neither of those fights are as high in experience as this one I'm fighting here. But because they're both on spiked squares, you can literally walk back and forth over and over and over again without ever incrementing your encounter list. For example, right now I've got to wade through some mummies just because every time I walk off the spiked square to trigger it again, I'm putting 1 step on my encounter list, and then, or 1 step on my encounter increment. Once that hits a certain level, that's how Final Fantasy knows, okay, it's time to have an encounter now. So, I've never actually done any power leveling in the volcano. I don't know... Let's use light again, that's fine. I don't know exactly how beneficial it would be to go there. Another place I could go would be back to the spiked square in... where Astus lives, and fight those mummies over and over, but at this point they don't give enough experience to be worth it. There are 2 other spots that are good for power leveling. One is the 1st floor of the Sea Shrine, where you fight a lot of Nagas and sharks and whatnot. They give a lot of experience, but you waste a lot of time because they're not spiked squares. You have to wander around until you find them. The other spot would be the 1st floor of the Temple of the Fiends, where you're fighting worms and Frosties. They give tons of experience, and enough really to offset the amount of time you spend wandering looking for fights. The problem there being is that those monsters do so much damage you can't, like, survive there very long. There is one more map in the game that has the highest encounter rate in the game, the highest number of fights per step, basically, than anywhere else in the game, against relatively high experience monsters, and that would be the last floor of the floating castle. The danger there being that if wandering around that map long enough, you will encounter the war mech, and if you encounter the war mech, that's probably a game over unless you're very, very high up in level, and I'm not. So, I just am going to sit here until I run the clock down. We'll see if I can get Rio another level or two. And then I will throw myself at Lich again. And his hit points are not going to go up very much. It's like, level ups at this stage of the game, he might be getting 3-4 hit points per level. I think a level 50 Black Wizard just still has under 400 hit points. I mean, it's just crazy. But we're going to do it. Of course, as a child, I did not put together that I should be grinding experience on spiked squares like this. So we literally used the Peninsula of Power to level up all the way through the game. I think we leveled up to 30 on things like Zombuls and Frost Wolves, and oh my god. That was dumb. Why do that? I don't know. One thing that would be kind of nice here is if those blue Zoids that I ran from much earlier in this dungeon, if they had gotten some shots off and took out one of my knights, that would have increased the amount of experience that Cole and Rio are getting here. Would have been nice to see, but it would have made grinding the zombies a little more dangerous because they do a lot of damage to Cole and Rio. It's only because I've got a knight absorbing my hits that they're surviving relatively unscathed. I mean, I think I accidentally told Rio to fight there, but whatever, I don't care. Not when my knights are doing 430 damage. What? Because you can't target your own guys, it is very difficult to eliminate one warrior from the fight that you want to eliminate. If I could do that, I would probably go to the Ice Cave. I would stock Rio up on all the magic spells he missed, Ice 3 and whatnot. Go to the Ice Cave with only him alive and grind the Eye, because that's like 3,000 experience per fight. It's insane. In a solo game, that's probably the best spot to do all your power leveling. Unless you are a solo white wizard, in case the ZombieDs are much better because you can cast harm on them and kill them like that. I think Cole was right on the brink of getting his next hit, too. Which I think has now happened since we've been in here. How close is Rio to one more level? I think I'll check after this fight, and then maybe I'll just make a 20-minute video instead of 15. It's okay to have one of those every now and then. Not often, though. It looks like about 10 more of these fights. He'll go up another level. So this is a pretty quick way to power level. And the cool thing about Final Fantasy is that power leveling is not a thing you have to do after every mission. You don't really... It's like, as kids, we played the game, we would go do a story mission, and then we would just take a break and just spend a lot of time leveling up for the next story mission. But that's really not necessary. Really, the only time you'd want to level up is, okay, my party needs to do something that it can't physically do with enough likelihood that resetting is an option. That's the only time you'd really need to level up in Final Fantasy 1. So, leveling up to get the Mazmune out of the Temple of Fiends, I'm pretty much okay with it. This specific task would be easier to complete if I had a second mage in the party of any kind. Would make this considerably easier because then I would have 2 characters who can get me out of the dungeon instead of 1. Because even a red wizard can use warp and exit, I do believe. A white wizard would be better for this task, because first of all, she can get me out of the dungeon in 1 spell charge instead of 9. So I wouldn't have to walk back at all. As soon as I got to the treasure box, I could immediately leave the dungeon. Even if she couldn't, though, she would still be better just because she has higher hit points. She's much more likely to survive the nuke spell I need her to survive than Rio is. But she can't do anything useful for the rest of the game like Rio was able to do. So I don't hold it against him. He is as Nasir programmed him. The Dawn of Souls version of this game, and I think the PlayStation Origins version does as well, but it keeps track of how many of each monster type you kill. So it's funny, because if you do something like this, like every monster will have a roughly equal distribution, and it'll say like 416 ZombieDs. Actually, in that version they're called dragon zombies, literally, so, eh. And then my return trip into the dungeon with the Mazmoon should be nice and breezy, because both Will and Jim will be getting outrageous damage. I have not leveled up Cole to the point where he does outrageous damage, but as you can see, he's holding his own more often than not. Let's see where he is, actually. Yeah, he's got his cleared 64 hit percent, and his damage is pretty amazing. So, it's nice to have 3 high damage options rather than just 2. I don't have the Sweep It In 4 instruction manual to read from this time. I put it back on the shelf. Had to do some cleaning up in here. Some creative organizing. When I play games, I tend to pull them off my game shelf and then just kind of pile them up on my desk as I go through them. And I've been playing a lot of the various Final Fantasy games this week, so like my computer desk and my little table that I keep that floats around the room behind me is like just covered in all my Final Fantasy games. Alright, Rio's at 251. That's a little better than he was. What does his spell list look like? With 5 charges of warp. Okay. I'm debating whether or not to get his level 3, his other level 3 spells. I think I will, just for completion's sake. Just to give him a little more offensive option than he has. He's almost good enough to use Nuke. I think that was the threshold we used as kids. You knew you were ready to go fight Chaos when your Black Wizard can use Nuke. If he has 1 charge of Nuke, he's pretty much strong enough. And you can see why I took the ship to this temple earlier instead of the airship, because you really do have to park this far away. A sandworm, what is this thing? It's probably not a rare monster, but you so rarely have to walk across the northern continents that there's like nothing up here to see, really. By the time you get here, you've already got your airship, so... Bye, Anklos. Make 2 quick pit stops. First, I'm going to go to Gaia. Hit the level 7 magic store. Get Ice 3. And then I will hit Crescent Lake and get Lit 3. And then I will save the game. And then I will end this video. And then I will make myself some macaroni and cheese. And then I'll probably play some more Final Fantasy. Because that's what I do here. Okay, so now Rio has 6 more spell charges that he can use in the last dungeon. I don't think he will get much use out of those, actually. But it'll be nice to have them and not need them, rather than need them and not have them. I think I'm going to title this video, Skip This Video.